I've been to America a few times now, probably about 6, 7 times. I've been to the East Coast, West Coast, and I've been to Milwaukee. I don't know what that counts as. And I saw a lot of black people just getting along with their lives. It doesn't look like they were oppressed to me at all. And so when people say, oh, black people are being oppressed, they're usually talking about, we could just call them ghettos and thug culture that comes out of them. But that's not in any way unique to black people at all. That's a consequence of poverty and fatherlessness. And it's a consequence of young men being poorly raised by single mothers, frankly.
Yeah.
And so at no point really can you point to that and say that's white people's fault.
Well, but and keep in mind, again, I feel like if you look at U.S. history, and I know many intersectional feminists will say this, or feminists in general, it's not that hard to see that there was an epidemic of anti-blackness that brought around, like, literally directly laws that would keep it was the drug issue. Okay, this is really weird history, and I'm not the best at name places or things, so make fun of me all you want, but here we go. So there was a time where the KKK and white supremacists were still very embedded in our police system, and from my understanding of how it went down, there were moments where they said, well, let's put people of color in prison for longer sentences for the same crimes, and it became a system, right? We look at it that now. We have case by case. We can take it as individual as you want, case by case. Now, I think we're getting stuck on semantics for systematic. Well, I think systematic is the word here that's hard for everyone.
Yeah, but I think you're mistaking the outcome of the system for the intention of the system. So how exactly does the historical interface between the police and the KKK prevent black people in 2018 from getting married?
No, they got. What do you mean? They were able to get married in the 1960s.
No, but black people have always been able to get married.
Interracial and stuff. Well, interracial wise.
Yeah, I'm not talking about interracial. I'm talking about within the black community, between black people, because it seems to me that the problem with black communities is a complete lack of marriage, because black families who marry have an average of around $66,000 income to the household per year. And that's very comparable to white families who marry. You get about $75,000, I think it is, $1,000. So there's not that much in that. And yet black households who are not married, single parent households, the average is about $33,000 a year. And you can see just on the face of it exactly where the poverty is coming from and where the problems are stemming from, especially when, I know from my own personal experiences as a child that young men need their fathers to keep them in line. There's no getting around that. And I actually put up a video today where I featured black women in the video saying, well, we need more male presence in our communities. So I think even black women are now starting to catch on. Well, actually, maybe having the father around is a lot easier way of keeping these rowdy young men in check. And so at no point can you point to any racism that's the problem there. It seems to be the personal decisions of the people in these communities. Do you see my point?
To an extent, okay, so we can say that as individuals, I've made decisions to stay in certain places, but an individual isn't just who they are in that moment. They are a history of their existence. They are a tradition of their families before them. And I do believe these things matter. I believe what you offer to your next generation of kin will carry on. And if you give them misinformation or negative wrong information, they will carry that on through the generations. It's why we still have flat earthers who continue making babies and continue. It's like, okay, no, we need to stop.
They're new. They're a new phenomenon. You didn't used to have flat earthers everywhere. I actually really agree with you that the situation that you inherit definitely determines at least strongly influences the course of your life, which to me seems like an even bigger argument for black communities taking responsibility for their own problems when it comes to marriage. Because during the sort of pre-civil rights era, I only know this off the top of my head because I did it in a video today, but black marriage rates were very comparable to white marriage rates. 78% of households were a married couple in the black community in 1950, whereas today it's something like 23%. And if you're being born into a situation like that, you're being born deliberately, intentionally almost, into a situation where you've been given severe disadvantages. Not only are you going to be poor, you're going to have to live in a poor area, you're going to have access to poor schools, you're going to know other poor people around you, you're going to have no real good examples of how to be a functional adult, especially as I can't even imagine, I'm a father and I'm married, and I can't even imagine how difficult it is to raise a child single-handedly. I have enough trouble dealing with my wife, and so I completely agree with you that what you inherit is a bad thing, but I think something that you inherit from the previous generation is far more important and has a far greater influence over the course of your life than something that happened 150 years ago or 70 years ago or something like that. It seems to be making excuses, is what I mean.
I mean, my audience knows that I don't tolerate many excuses. I will tolerate an acknowledgement of the struggle that you have endured and your past, but now we have to start being efficient about how you're going to get successful. But I do not in any way disregard their statements of systematic oppression through socialization or through expectation of behavior, because I think it's extremely valid. I just don't think it needs to be this way always. And I think in order to fight that, you have to know the system to fight the system, not just be anti the system. Like they always ask me, well, as a feminist, are you a socialist or a capitalist? I was like, where do I live? And they were like, America. I was like, that I guess I'm a fucking capitalist. Because at the end of the day, I don't have qualms with how a system works as long as I can function within it, learn its rules, and learn when I can break them or move away from them or adapt into a different culture. That's my theory. But that's because I'm an immigrant or my parents are immigrants. So maybe I have that immigrant mentality. Like, oh, Saddam's killing all the Christians. Peace out. We're going to go to America. But that's not to say that we didn't lose Iraq in the process. We had to let it go. And that makes me sad that it can't be a better place like it was 50 years ago or before Saddam was in power. I think you and I agree more than we probably disagree. I think we disagree on methods, and I think we disagree on maybe I should say, I say I'm an intersectional feminist if it helps people by just stating I acknowledge that I think that theory is pretty freaking valid. How we want to implement the theory is very different. And that is where I do move more away from the left. And I'm more of a liberal.
Sorry to interrupt again, but so you still defaulted back to talk about the systems and socialization of the Black communities.
Yeah.
Who is doing the socializing if not the Black people themselves?
Well, so that does play a huge role. One's understanding of their place in existence is derivative of the majority culture. And the majority of culture is white culture. And that's totally fine. And I'm not talking negatively about that. But what I'm saying is that matters. Just like straight culture is the dominant, I learned as a young queer person, I wasn't accepted and I was different. I even learned that about my features as a young child in school. So what I did as I was getting older was I learned to adapt, and I learned in what ways I was different so I could learn in what ways that mattered. And I think what happens is that we disregard people's personal stories or their what they're telling us because we think, well, we didn't go through that, so how could you be going through that? But they're telling you right now they're going through it. So it's our job to decide how much of our resources we're going to invest into this person's existence, and then will it help the greater society by doing it? And I do think by uplifting Black people and minorities, our world will be better. I don't think we need to shit on white men. I'm sorry, guys. You're just not special enough for me to spend my time shitting on you. You are perfectly decent individuals. And as a whole group, I'm not going to sit here and just it's not my, you know what I mean? Unless you consensually want to negotiate for King Saint, then we'll talk. But that's just the kind of stuff that for me, that's how I live my life, which is acknowledging systems work and then acknowledging how to get above the system. Do you feel like you're not, I don't know, I feel like I'm disappointing you a little bit. Should I not be, should I be a little angrier or I think we just have a lot more in common. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we do. I'm very interested in the way you think about these things. So, when you say that the dominant culture is white, I don't agree. I think that if you went into one of these Black ghettos, the dominant culture would be anything but white. It would be anti-white. It would be an open rejection of white people. And I think that if I went into one of these ghettos, I would be in physical danger because of this rejection of white people. What do you think?
Okay, so I just found where we're kind of miscommunicating. So let me do that first. So I think in pockets of the United States, absolutely. When you go into certain specific places, you will 100% be under duress or threat. As a system, what I'm talking about is like media, white culture, decides clothing, decisions. Okay. A lot of the artists are white.
Sorry to interrupt, but I should have been more specific about this. Okay, so do you spend a lot of time watching World Star Hip Hop?
No. I don't watch reality TV.
World Star's a website where they upload videos of people fighting a lot, and that's my knowledge of it. But when you say media, what you're talking about is what you perceive to be the dominant culture, but that's only because that's what you watch. If you don't watch any of these things, then you won't perceive that to be the dominant culture. If you don't explore these things, you won't experience them. And I don't think that many people in these ghettos do explore these things. I think they do. I think they're quite parochial in that way. I think they don't have a particularly broad outlook, which is why they tend to get trapped in this kind of ghetto situation. That's what they know. That's what they expect the world to be. And they don't have very broad horizons. And so I don't think that you can say, well, the dominant culture is white, look at the media, therefore, because I just don't think it's an accurate representation of what the people who actually live in these situations are actually imbibing during their daily experiences. So this is the problem. This is the problem I have with like systematic thinking like this. It's very inaccurate. Sure. I mean, like the very term social justice, I don't even think it has a real definition. And I don't think that anyone can ever point out how you can have a social justice. All justice, in my opinion, has to be individual. It's impossible to have group justice because not all members of a group are the same. And in fact, you'll specifically be privileging people within a group who don't deserve to be privileged and oppressing people within a group who don't necessarily want you to do what you're doing just by treating them as a group. So you're creating injustices by just approaching it like a group. So this is, I guess, the difference in our thinking here.
What is a group of individuals when huddled together?
Well, it depends how you're looking at them and how you're defining them, doesn't it? I mean, like, you can get a voluntary association of people who join a golf club or something. And, I mean, for example, in Britain, right, we've got a long history of what are called unincorporated trusts, which are just groups of people who have a shared interest and who do things along that interest. I mean, and they can get things done. Like, this is the advantage of common law, which... but coming from English common law, for example, like the Anglers Trusts, all through the early 20th century, the Thames, the River Lee.
I'm sorry, Carl, it's paused for me. Is it paused for anyone else?
No, he has paused, yes. There goes. He's back.
Yep. Using English common law, using lawsuits.
You're breaking up.
Sorry, Carl.
You're breaking up pretty bad there.
Sorry about that. Okay, so the Anglers Trust managed to clean up the Thames against industrialists using English common law just by freedom of association and their willingness to associate as a group of people. But that was by choice, you know. But as soon as you say, well, okay, this is the declaration for gay people or black people, a black person who opposes you is, by your definition, some kind of Uncle Tom. And this is why I went to Berkeley and I saw these far-left protesters and I asked them, why are there so many non-white people in the white supremacy group over there? And the guy just was just like, they're Uncle Toms. Just that was it. It's like, so that's a complete negation of their personality, their agency, their identity. They're traitors to the cause, because when you start introducing everything into the politics of group identity, it's the politics of power and it's the politics of victimhood, and there can be no negotiation between the two groups. It's just a 100% win or 100% lose situation.
So this is where I think, okay, so I hold myself up to my ideal standard constantly, which means if I didn't believe in identity politics, I would never reference it as a real or even joking thing. And that's a little bit of my confusion, because in reality, individuals in a group is called a collective. If a bunch of atheists get together to fight for our rights, we are a fucking identity collecting group. One of the things that I thought was kind of cute is that you did a speech a couple days ago on a live stage. I think I even had some friends who were there, which was kind of fun. And you made a joke by like, look at all these white males. That kind of stuff is interesting to me, because I know you don't believe in identity politics, and I know you're making a joke. It's literally, I get it, hashtag joke. But I guess my worry as somebody who's trying to be a better thinker is I'm trying to also display better attitudes and contributions to society. So what I'm asking is, if you don't believe in identity groups, then why do we start off our speeches making fun of that idea, but then celebrating it? Dave Rubin did that when he had Blair White on him and Candace Owens, and cracked me up. He's like, look, I'm gay, you're black, you're trans. And I'm like, that's identity politics. It's fine. I'm white men, identity, it's fine. There's nothing unethical about identity politics. The way you implement it is what's unethical. Okay. Right? Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with it acknowledging
there is something inherently wrong to it. There is something inherently
There's something wrong with saying that I have curly hair, or that I have hazel eyes, or that I am from this ethnic background?
I will explain. There's nothing wrong with being something, obviously. You know, obviously there's nothing wrong with being what you are. But politicizing certain aspects of yourself especially immutable ones, especially when you suggest that the category of identity should be encompassed for everyone with this identity, then you're laying claim to the beliefs of other people that you don't know and you've never met, and who often will oppose you on those grounds. So what you're doing is